Have you ever walked past a homeless person and wondered about their story? What if the dirt-caked man huddled in the alley wasn't just another forgotten soul? For 26-year-old Mia Russo, a simple act of kindness, a leftover sandwich given to a crippled beggar every single day, was just a small light in her own dark world. She thought she was saving him from starvation. She had no idea that he was the one who was about to save her. What happens when the man who hasn't spoken a word in 6 months finally looks you in the eye and says 4 words that shatter your reality? I am a billionaire. Stay with us for a story of compassion, deceit, and a twist that will make you question everything you think you know about wealth and poverty. The bell above the door of the Corner Spoon Diner was a tarnished brass thing, and its jingle was less a cheerful greeting and more a weary sigh. It was the soundtrack to Mia Russo's life. Every chime meant another customer to serve another table to wipe another dollar, closer to paying the rent on her shoebox apartment in a less than desirable part of Philadelphia. At 26, Mia felt closer to 60. Her dreams of attending culinary school, of creating art with food, had long been ground down by the harsh reality of her mother's medical bills and her own mountain of student debt from a community college degree that had gotten her nowhere. Her life was a repeating loop: wake up before dawn, pull on her faded blue uniform that always smelled faintly of greasework, a 10-hour shift, then sometimes a second job bussing tables at a bar downtown, and fall into bed with her feet aching and her mind numb. The Corner Spoon was a place lost in time. Red vinyl booths were patched with silver duct tape. The countertop was a constellation of coffee cup rings, and the air was thick with the holy trinity of diner smells: frying bacon, stale coffee, and industrial-strength cleaner. Her boss, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Henderson, cared about 2 things: turnover and the bottom line. Her co-worker, a lifer named Brenda, who had seen it all and was impressed by none of it, moved with a cynical efficiency that Mia sometimes envied. Every night, at precisely 10:05 p.m., 5 minutes after closing, Mia's final ritual began. She'd take the day-old bread, the leftover slices of roast beef or turkey that Henderson would just throw out, and make a thick, hearty sandwich. She'd wrap it carefully in wax paper tuck, in a handful of fries if there were any left, and add a bottle of water. Then she'd step out the back door into the grimy alley. And he would be there. He was a fixture as much a part of the alley as the overflowing dumpster and the graffiti-scarred brick wall. He sat on a flattened cardboard box, his back against the cold brick, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. His face was a roadmap of hardship, etched with deep lines, and shadowed by a scraggly grey-streaked beard. His eyes, though, were what held you. They were a startlingly clear shade of blue, but they were vacant, lost in a fog of pain or memory that Mia couldn't begin to fathom. He never spoke. He never asked for anything. He just existed. The first time Mia had seen him months ago, she'd been startled. Brenda had warned her off. "Don't even look at him, sweetie," she'd said, wiping down the counter with a rag. "You give them an inch, they take a mile. Probably a junkie." But Mia saw something else. She saw a profound loneliness that echoed her own. Her life was full of noise and people, but she was utterly alone. He was surrounded by silence, and she felt a strange kinship with that. So that first night she'd brought him a sandwich. He'd flinched when she approached his hand, instinctively going to a grimy bundle of rags beside him. She placed the sandwich and water gently on the cardboard a few feet away from him and backed away. It was going to be thrown out," she'd stammered, feeling foolish. He watched her with those empty eyes. She left her heart pounding. The next morning, the wax paper and empty bottle were neatly tucked beside the dumpster. It became their routine. Every night she'd bring the food, He'd watch her approach, she'd set it down. He'd give a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was the only communication they ever had. She learned the rhythms of his silent existence. She noticed the threadbare nature of his coat when the autumn wind turned sharp, the way he shivered uncontrollably on rainy nights. One evening after a particularly brutal shift, where a customer had berated her to tears over cold coffee, Moore felt a wave of despair wash over her. What was the point of any of it? This endless cycle of work and exhaustion, just to scrape by. She made the sandwich on autopilot, her hands moving, but her mind elsewhere. "Still feeding the alley cat, Mia?" Brenda asked, pulling her purse from under the counter. "He's a person, Brenda." "Yeah, well, that person is probably got a better savings account than you do. They say some of these guys are fakers, pulling in hundreds a day tax-free." "He's not faking that leg," Mia retorted, a bit more sharply than she intended. "And he's starving. Your funeral. Don't come crying to me when he follows you home one night." Mia ignored her and pushed open the back door. The cold air was a shock. It was raining a miserable, bone-chilling drizzle. He was huddled under the meager overhang of the roof, looking smaller and more broken than ever. His clothes were soaked through. She placed the sandwich down. Tonight something was different. She couldn't just walk away. She hesitated, clutching the doorknob. You should try to find a shelter," she said, her voice quiet. "It's getting too cold." He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the wet pavement. But he didn't flinch away either. He just sat there, a statue of misery. Defeated Mia went back inside the weight of her own helplessness and his pressing down on her. That night she lay in bed, listening to the rain lash against her window, and for the first time she prayed. She didn't pray for a better life or for her debts to disappear. She prayed for the silent man in the alley. The next day, she brought him not just a sandwich, but a thick wool blanket she'd bought at a thrift store for $5. $5 she desperately needed for her electric bill. When she handed it to him, their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. His skin was like ice. He looked up, and for the first time, the fog in his clear blue eyes seemed to part. He looked directly at her, a real, focused gaze. He opened his mouth, a dry, rasping sound emerging. But no words came out. He simply took the blanket, pulled it around his shoulders, and gave her that same slow nod. But this time, it felt different. It felt like a thank you. For Mia, in her world of transactional interactions and feigned politeness, that silent, genuine gesture was worth more than any tip she'd received all week. It was a flicker of light in the echoing emptiness. The passing of weeks saw the seasons turn with a brutal indifference. The vibrant hues of autumn bled into the stark monochrome grey of early winter. The wind that whipped through the alley behind the corner spoon now had teeth biting at any exposed skin. Mia's ritual continued, a small, defiant act of warmth against the encroaching cold. The blanket was a permanent fixture around the man's shoulders, a tattered shield against the elements. She started bringing him hot soup in a thermos paid for with her tip money. It was usually just the diner's soup of the day, but it was hot, and that was what mattered. Brenda's commentary became a constant, cynical refrain. "You're going to get yourself a Nobel Prize, Maya," she'd snipe, watching her pour broth into the thermos. "Saint Amelia of the greasy spoon." "It's just soup, Brenda. It's never just soup. It's an attachment. You're getting attached to a situation you can't fix." Mia knew there was a kernel of truth in Brenda's words. Her concern for the man had grown beyond simple pity. He was a part of her day, a silent anchor in her turbulent life. She'd started noticing more about him. The way his hands, though grimy, had long, elegant fingers and well-kept nails, a stark contrast to the rest of his appearance. Or the way he would sometimes stare at the sky with an expression not of despair, but of profound, thoughtful sorrow, as if he were contemplating a complex equation. The first crack in their silent understanding appeared on a Tuesday night. A group of teenagers, loud and reeking of cheap beer, cut through the alley as Mia was leaving the soup. "Whoa, check it out," one of them, a lanky kid with a sneer, said, pointing at the man. "Gollum's got himself a girlfriend." His friend snickered. Mia's face flushed with anger. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Or what, you gonna hit us with a ladle?" The boy taunted, taking a step closer. The man on the ground didn't move a muscle, but his eyes, clear and sharp, darted from the teenager's face to Mia's. "Just go," Mia insisted, standing between them and him. "He's not bothering anyone." The leader swaggered forward, kicking at the man's outstretched, twisted leg. "What's the matter, old man? Cat got your tongue?" A raw, protective instinct flared inside Mia. "Get out of here!" she yelled, her voice ringing with a surprising force that echoed off the brick walls. "Before I call the cops." The teenager was taken aback by her ferocity. He held his hands up in mock surrender. All right. Keep your pet. He stinks anyway." They sauntered off, their laughter bouncing off the walls before fading into the night. Mia's adrenaline was pumping. She turned back to the man. He was looking at her, and the expression in his eyes was one she'd never seen before. It was a complex mixture of gratitude, surprise, and something else, assessment. It was as if he was seeing her for the very first time, not just as a source of food, but as a person. He lifted a hand, a slight trembling gesture, as if to reach for her, but then let it fall. The moment passed, and the usual mask of vacant detachment settled back over his features. But Mia had seen it, a flicker of the person underneath the grime and rags. The second crack was internal. A letter arrived from the hospital regarding her mother's care. The outstanding balance had grown, and the financial aid office was requesting a meeting. The amount was staggering, an impossible figure that made her feel like she was drowning. That same day, Mr. Henderson cut her hours, citing a winter slump in business. The walls were closing in. That night, as she stood in the diner's kitchen, the leftover roast beef in her hand, she hesitated. The sandwich felt heavy. This was food she could eat. This was a meal she could save for tomorrow, saving her the few dollars it would cost to buy her own dinner. Brenda's words echoed in her mind. "You can't fix him. You can barely fix yourself." She looked at the sandwich, then at the back door. A war raged within her. The practical, desperate part of her screamed to keep it. It was survival. But then she pictured him sitting in the freezing cold, waiting. She remembered the flicker of humanity in his eyes after she'd defended him. With a deep sigh that felt like it came from the very bottom of her soul, she finished making the sandwich. It was an act of faith she wasn't sure she could afford. When she stepped into the alley, the cold was more biting than ever. He was there, a huddled shape in the darkness. She set the food down, along with a thermos of coffee this time. She didn't wait for the nod. She just turned and walked away, the weight of her own problems threatening to crush her. She felt foolish, weak, a sucker. The next evening, when she went to retrieve the empty thermos, she found something unexpected. Tucked into the handle was a single, wilted daisy. It was grubby and half dead, clearly plucked from a neglected city planter. But it was there, a silent, reciprocal gesture, a recognition of her sacrifice. Mia picked up the flower, her fingers tracing its limp petals. She looked at the spot where he sat, now empty, as he'd likely moved to find a warmer place for the night. And she cried. She cried for her mother, for her debt, for her lost dreams. But she also cried with a strange, bittersweet sense of hope. In a world that had taken so much from her, a broken man had found a way to give something back. The daisy was a crack, not just in their routine, but in the thick wall of her own despair. It was a tiny, impossible bloom in the middle of a brutal winter. The daisy marked a subtle shift in their silent relationship. It was a shared secret, a fragile symbol of their connection. Mia kept it in a small glass of water on her windowsill, and even as it withered completely, she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. The man in the alley remained silent, his demeanor unchanged to any outside observer, but Mia could now read the nuances in his gaze. She saw a flicker of recognition when she arrived, a hint of something akin to gratitude when she left. It was a language without words, and she was becoming fluent. The winter tightened its grip on the city. News reports spoke of a polar vortex and record-low temperatures. Shelters were overflowing, and stories of the homeless freezing on the streets became a grim staple of the evening news. Mia's anxiety for the man grew into a gnawing fear. She started bringing extra blankets, hand warmers she bought at the dollar store, and 2 thermoses, one with soup, one with hot coffee. One Thursday night, the city was hit by a freezing rainstorm. Sleet and ice pellets slicked the streets and sidewalks, and the wind howled like a hungry wolf. The corner spoon was dead, and Mr. Henderson sent Mia home early. As she bundled up to leave, a sense of dread washed over her. The alley would be a wind tunnel of ice. "You're not actually going out there in this, are you?" Brenda asked, locking the cash register. "I have to check on him." "Mia, for God's sake. He's a grown man. He knows how to survive. You're going to get pneumonia." But Mia couldn't shake the image of him, huddled on his cardboard box, exposed to the elements. "I'll be quick," she said, grabbing the bag with the food and a new heavy-duty tarp she'd bought at a hardware store. The alley was treacherous. A thin sheet of ice covered the asphalt, and the wind drove the sleet into her face like tiny needles. She found him in his usual spot, but he wasn't just shivering. He was convulsing. His breathing was shallow and ragged, and a terrible rattling sound came from his chest with every exhale. The old wool blanket was soaked through, offering no protection. Panic seized her. "Hey!" she said, her voice swallowed by the wind. She knelt beside him, her own knees soaking through her jeans. "Hey, can you hear me?" She touched his forehead. It was burning hot. He was sick, dangerously sick. His eyes fluttered open. The usual fog was there, but it was thicker, clouded with fever and delirium. He tried to speak, but it came out as a pained cough that shook his entire frame. Okay, we need to get you out of here," Mia said, more to herself than to him. "You need a doctor." She knew calling an ambulance was the right thing to do, but she also knew what it meant. They would take him to a county hospital, where he'd be treated and then discharged back onto the street, probably with a bill he could never pay. And she might never see him again. The thought caused a surprising pang in her chest. Instead, she made a decision born of pure compassion and perhaps a touch of recklessness. "I'm going to help you," she said, her voice firm. "We need to get you somewhere warm. Just for a little bit." Using the wall for leverage, she managed to get him to his feet. He was surprisingly heavy, a dead weight leaning against her. His twisted leg seemed useless, and he groaned in pain with every movement. It was a slow, agonizing process, shuffling across the icy alley to the small parking lot, where her beat-up 1998 sedan was parked. She half lifted, half dragged him into the passenger seat, his wet, ragged clothes soaking into the fabric. Her apartment was only a 10-minute drive, but it felt like an eternity. She cranked the heat, and the car filled with the smell of wet wool and sickness. He was barely conscious, his head lolling against the window. Getting him up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment was an ordeal that left her gasping for breath, her muscles screaming in protest. She guided him into her tiny 1-room apartment and settled him on her small, worn-out sofa. She stripped off his wet coat and blanket, trying not to be intrusive, and covered him with every blanket she owned. She worked on autopilot, her mind racing. She made him some hot tea, holding the mug to his lips and helping him take small sips. She found some old aspirin and coaxed him to swallow too. For hours she sat by the sofa, placing cool, damp cloths on his forehead, listening to his labored breathing. In the dim light of her apartment, away from the grime of the alley, she could see his features more clearly. Despite the beard and the lines of hardship, there was a structure to his face, a high forehead, and a strong jaw that spoke of a different life. Sometime after 3 a.m., his fever broke. The shivering subsided, and his breathing became deeper, more regular. He was asleep, truly asleep. Maya, utterly exhausted, slumped into the only other chair in the room and watched him. In the quiet of her small apartment, surrounded by her own poverty, she had brought this broken man in from the storm. It was a crazy, irresponsible thing to do. And yet, it felt like the most right thing she had ever done. She must have drifted off. She awoke with a start to the grey light of dawn filtering through her window. The man was awake. He was sitting up, leaning against the arm of the sofa, and he was watching her. The fever was gone, and the fog in his eyes was completely absent. They were clear, intelligent, and focused on her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. The vacant beggar from the alley was gone. In his place was a man who looked powerful. "Good morning," she said softly, feeling suddenly shy and awkward. "How are you feeling?" He cleared his throat, a dry, rusty sound. He looked around her small, tidy apartment, taking in the worn furniture, the stack of bills on her small kitchen table, the withered daisy in the glass on the windowsill. His gaze returned to her, and it was filled with an emotion she couldn't decipher. He opened his mouth, and this time his voice was not a rasp. It was deep and resonant, though cracked with disuse. He spoke 4 words that seemed to hang in the air, altering the very fabric of her reality. "I am a billionaire." Mia stared. The words echoed in the small room, utterly absurd, nonsensical. She thought perhaps the fever had left him delirious. Maybe he was mentally ill, suffering from delusions of grandeur. It would make more sense than anything else. "You should rest," she said gently, standing up to get him some water. "You were very sick." "I am perfectly lucid, Amelia," he said. The sound of her full name, a name she hadn't told him, sent a chill down her spine. How do you know my name?" "Your name tag," he replied, his voice steadier now. "I've read it every night for the past 6 months. Amelia Russo." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and a faint, sad smile touched his lips. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" Mia just shook her head, clutching the back of her chair for support. "My name is Silas Corbin." The name meant nothing to her. She didn't follow the stock market or read the business section. He seemed to understand. "I am the founder and CEO of Corbin Global Enterprises." He watched her face for a reaction, but there was none. "We specialize in logistics technology and private equity. We have offices in 20 countries. Our headquarters is the Corbin Tower downtown, the tallest building in the city." Mia's mind reeled. The Corbin Tower. Of course. Everyone knew that gleaming skyscraper of black glass and steel that dominated the Philadelphia skyline. It was a monument to a world of wealth and power so far removed from her own that it might as well have been on another planet. And this man, this filthy, broken man she'd pulled out of an alley, was claiming to be its king. That's not possible," she whispered. "Why?" He asked, his blue eyes sharp and piercing. "Because I have a beard, because my clothes are torn, because I accept your charity every night." Before she could answer, a sharp, insistent knock echoed from her apartment door. Mia froze. No one ever came to her door, especially not this early. "Do not answer it," Silas said, his voice dropping to a low, commanding tone. The transformation was staggering. The pathetic beggar was gone, replaced by a man who radiated authority. The knocking came again, louder this time. "Mia Russo, I know you're in there. Open the door. We just want to talk." The voice was male smooth and edged with impatience. "Who is that?" Mia breathed, her fear mounting. "That," Silas said with a sigh of profound weariness, "is my nephew Sterling." A sleek black phone suddenly appeared in Silas's hand, produced from a hidden pocket within his ragged coat. Mia hadn't even noticed it. With deft movements of his long fingers, he typed a quick message. "They've been looking for me," he explained, his eyes on the door. "Sterling has been trying to track my movements. He must have followed you last night." The reality of the situation began to crash down on Mia. This wasn't a delusion. This was real, and it was dangerous. "What is going on?" she demanded, her voice a mix of fear and frustration. Silas looked at her, his expression softening. "You deserve an explanation. You've earned it 1,000 times over." He took a deep breath. 2 years ago, my wife Catherine and my daughter Lily were killed. A drunk driver ran a red light. He was a hedge fund manager, 28 years old, celebrating a big deal. He was texting his girlfriend at the moment of impact. The raw pain in his voice was a physical thing in the room. Mia felt her own throat tighten in sympathy. "I lost everything that mattered in an instant," he continued. "My world, it just collapsed. I went through the motions running the company, but nothing had any meaning. All I could see was the greed, the selfishness." The man who killed my family walked away with a slap on the wrist. His lawyers argued that a prison sentence would ruin his promising career. And all I had were his empty apologies and my billions of dollars. He gestured around Mia's humble apartment. My money couldn't buy them back. It couldn't buy justice. It felt like a curse. Everyone I knew, my family, my business partners, they all looked at me with pity, but their eyes were always on the money, wondering who would get it. My nephew Sterling, my sister's son, he became particularly attentive. He spoke of legacy, of protecting the company, but I saw the avarice in his eyes. He was just like the man who killed my family, entitled, greedy, and empty. So I decided to disappear, to conduct an experiment. I wanted to see if there was any genuine, selfless kindness left in the world. I wanted to strip away everything, my name, my wealth, my power, and see how the world would treat the lowest of the low. So I became him. He gestured to his ragged clothes. A crippled beggar in an alley. The limp is real, by the way. An old skiing injury. I just exaggerated it. He looked at her, and the gratitude in his eyes was overwhelming. For 6 months I watched people walk by. They averted their eyes. They sneered. They threw trash. I was invisible. I was nothing. I was beginning to believe my nephew was right, that the world was just a pit of vipers. And then there was you. The memory of the first sandwich, the blanket, the soup, the way she had stood up to the teenagers, It all flooded back to Mia, but now cast in an impossible new light. "You never asked for anything," Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. "You defended me. You gave me your warmth when you had so little for yourself. And last night, you saved my life, not because you thought I was a billionaire, but because you thought I was a human being." The knocking at the door stopped. A moment later, Mia's phone buzzed, an unknown number. She looked at Silas, who nodded for her to answer. "Hello, Ms. Russo," the smooth voice from the hallway said. "This is Sterling Corbin. I believe my uncle is with you. I'm very concerned for his well-being. He is not well mentally. He's been having episodes. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 for your trouble and for you to simply let us come in and bring him home. No questions asked." The bribe was so blatant, so cynical, it made Mia feel sick. Silas held out his hand for the phone. Mia gave it to him. "Sterling." Silas said, his voice now cold as ice. There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. "Uncle Silas, thank God we've been so worried. Where are you? Let me come get you." "I am exactly where I need to be," Silas replied. "You have 5 minutes to get away from this building. If any of my security team, who are now 2 minutes away, see you or your hired goons anywhere near Miss Russo again, I will personally see to it that the only business you conduct for the rest of your life is from a prison cell. Am I clear?" The line went dead. Silas handed the phone back to Mia. He looked weary, but also resolute. "The game is over," he said. "Sterling is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent to take control of the company. My little experiment has given him a lot of ammunition. You, Amelia, are now the only person who can prove he's wrong. You are the only person who has seen both sides of me." Suddenly Mia understood. She wasn't just a waitress who had been kind to a beggar. She was a witness, a key player in a war for a corporate empire. Her small, simple life had just collided with a world of unimaginable wealth and ruthless ambition, and she was standing at the epicenter of the explosion. The arrival of Silas's security team was as discreet as it was efficient. 2 figures in plain but impeccably tailored clothes, a man and a woman, appeared at her door moments after Silas ended the call. The woman, whose name was Isabella, had a calm, authoritative presence and eyes that missed nothing. She carried a garment bag and a briefcase. While Silas showered and changed in Mia's tiny bathroom, Isabella spoke to Mia in low, professional tones. "Mr. Corbin has told me what you did for him, Ms. Russo. On behalf of his personal staff, we are profoundly grateful." The sincerity in her voice was disarming. Silas emerged a changed man. The grime and despair were washed away. He was clean-shaven, his grey-streaked hair neatly combed. He was dressed in a simple but clearly expensive cashmere sweater and dark trousers. The posture of the beggar, the slumped shoulders, the downcast eyes, was gone. He stood tall, his gaze direct and commanding. He was still the man from the alley, but now he wore the skin he was born to, and the effect was dizzying. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Silas said to Mia. "Sterling won't give up. He knows you're a threat to his plans." "A threat I'm a waitress," Mia said, the absurdity of it all hitting her again. "You are the one person who can testify to my state of mind over the last 6 months without a vested financial interest," Silas corrected her. "To Sterling, that makes you the most dangerous person in the world." And so began the most surreal day of Mia Russo's life. She was escorted from her rundown apartment building, past the nervous glances of her neighbors, and into a black sedan with tinted windows that was so quiet inside it felt like a sensory deprivation chamber. They drove not to the gleaming Corbin Tower, but to a penthouse suite at the Rittenhouse Hotel, a place Mia had only ever seen in magazines. The suite was larger than her entire apartment building floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city. The furniture was minimalist and elegant. The air was scented with something clean and expensive, and a full staff was on standby. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and terrifying. Mia walked to the window and looked down at the city below. From up here, the streets she trudged along every day looked like neat, orderly lines. The corner spoon was an invisible speck somewhere in the distance. She felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if she were watching a movie of someone else's life. Silas ordered a lavish room service breakfast, but Mia could barely touch the perfectly poached eggs and artisanal toast. Her mind was a whirlwind. "What is he going to do?" she asked. "Sterling will try to discredit you," Silas said, sipping his black coffee. "He will dig into your life, your debt, your mother's illness. He will paint you as a desperate, unstable woman who is either lying for money or was manipulated by a senile old man. He will try to buy you, and when that fails, he will try to break you." The cold certainty in his voice was chilling. The first attack came sooner than she expected. That afternoon, her phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson from the diner. "Mia, what the hell is going on?" He sounded frantic. "There are 2 men here from the health department. They're talking about shutting us down. They said they got an anonymous tip about a rodent infestation and improper food handling. It's nonsense. We haven't had a violation in 10 years. Mia's blood ran cold. "Sterling," she whispered to Silas, who was listening intently. "Tell Mr. Henderson you know nothing about it and that you quit Effective immediately," Silas instructed quietly. "Tell him you're sorry. Isabella will handle the rest." With a heavy heart, Mia did as he said, ending the call with her former boss's confused and angry voice in her ear. She'd just lost her job, her only source of income. Isabella was already on her phone, her voice a stiletto of quiet efficiency. "Get me Councilman Roberts. Yes, now. And then get a message to David Chen at the Inquirer. Anonymous tip. Corporate sabotage in the restaurant sector. Trace a line back to a shell corporation owned by Sterling Corbin." Mia watched in awe. It was a chess game played with people's lives and livelihoods, and she was a pawn. The next day, Sterling made his move directly. While Silas was in a meeting with his legal team, a courier delivered a package to the hotel for Mia. Inside was a cashier's check made out to her for $250,000. There was also a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "This is a gesture of goodwill for the compassion you showed my uncle during his time of confusion. Accept it and return to your life. There will be no more communication. If you refuse, be assured that every aspect of your life will be put under a microscope. Your mother's care, for instance. I understand state-funded facilities can be so unpleasant." The threat was unmistakable, a velvet glove around a fist of iron. He was targeting her mother. He was targeting her greatest vulnerability. Mia felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. This man who had never known a day of hardship thought he could buy her silence and threaten her family. He thought she was just like him, motivated by money and fear. He had no idea who he was dealing with. She thought of the cold nights in the alley. She thought of the wilted daisy. She thought of the quiet dignity of the man she had helped, the man who had lost everything that mattered and was still fighting. When Silas returned, she showed him the check and the note. He read it, his jaw tightening. "I am so sorry, Amelia. I never wanted to bring this into your life." "He's wrong about me," Mia said, her voice shaking but clear. "He thinks because I'm poor, I have no honor. He thinks I'm weak." She tore the check in half, then in quarters, and dropped the pieces on the table. He's about to find out how wrong he is. A slow smile spread across Silas Corbin's face. It was the first genuine hopeful smile she had seen from him. "Yes," he said. "I believe he is." The battle lines were drawn. It was no longer just about Silas's fortune or his company. It was about Mia's integrity. Sterling Corbin had tried to buy her, then threaten her. Now she was going to fight back. The poor waitress from the corner spoon was about to go to war with a titan of industry, and she had no intention of losing. The days that followed were a blur of legal strategy, sessions, depositions, and preparations for a competency hearing that Sterling had officially filed with the courts. Mia lived in the bubble of the hotel suite, a world of hushed voices and intense planning. Silas's legal team, led by a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer named Arthur Finch, prepped her for hours on end. They asked her about every interaction, every silent nod, every thermos of soup. They were building a case based on the consistency and character of her testimony. But Mia felt a growing sense of unease. Their strategy was defensive. They were reacting to Sterling's moves, preparing to refute his claims that Silas was a delusional old man. Sterling's lawyers were painting a picture of Silas as a man so broken by grief he'd lost touch with reality, and Mia as a cunning opportunist who had latched onto him. They were twisting her kindness into a weapon against her. "This isn't enough," Mia said one evening, interrupting a strategy session between Silas and Arthur. Both men looked at her in surprise. "Amelia, your testimony is our strongest asset," Arthur said patiently. "My testimony is my word against his money and his army of doctors who will say you're unstable," she countered, looking directly at Silas. "He's playing offense. He's attacking my character, my old boss, my mother. We need to go on the offense. We need to prove not just that you're sane, but that he is malicious." Silas leaned forward, intrigued. "And how do you suggest we do that?" Mia took a deep breath. An idea had been forming in her mind, born from years of observing people from the near invisibility of a waitress. "Sterling thinks I'm nobody, a poor, uneducated waitress. He wouldn't look twice at me if I was serving him a drink. We should use that." A plan began to take shape. It was audacious, risky, and relied entirely on Mia's ability to be overlooked. Isabella, using the vast resources of Corbin Global, discovered that Sterling was a regular at a high-end exclusive restaurant called the Onyx Room, a place where he conducted his most sensitive business, believing he was untouchable. "I can get a job there," Mia said. "Just for a night or two. A temp agency, a catering gig. People in his position, they don't see the wait staff. We're just moving parts of the furniture. He'd never recognize me." Arthur Finch looked horrified. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. He could see you. It would compromise your credibility as a witness." "My credibility is already being compromised," Mia shot back. "This is how we get proof. We need to hear him in his own words admit what he's doing." Silas was quiet for a long moment, studying Mia's determined face. He saw not a victim caught in his drama, but a fierce, intelligent ally. He had been looking for one good person, and he had found something more, a courageous one. "Do it," Silas said, overriding Arthur's objections. "Isabella, make it happen. Get her in there, and get her equipped." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Isabella, with her typical ruthless efficiency, secured Mia a one-night gig at the Onyx Room through a high-end catering service, citing a last-minute staffing shortage. Another team outfitted Mia with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. It wasn't a clumsy wire from a spy movie. It was a tiny, high-fidelity microphone disguised as a button on her uniform, and a micro-camera embedded in a simple-looking pen she would carry in her breast pocket. Walking into the Onyx Room was like stepping into another universe. It was a world of dark wood, hushed tones, and the soft clinking of expensive crystal. The air hummed with power and privilege. Mia, dressed in the restaurant's stark black uniform, felt her old insecurities creep back, but then she remembered Sterling's threat against her mother, and her fear hardened into resolve. Her station was by a stroke of luck, engineered by Isabella in the private alcove, where Sterling was scheduled to have dinner with his two closest associates on the Corbin Global Board, men he was trying to sway to his side. When he arrived, Mia's heart hammered against her ribs. He was exactly as she imagined, tall, handsome, in a predatory way, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car. He walked past her without a glance, his focus entirely on his guests. To him, she was invisible. The plan was working. She served them water, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She took their drink orders, her voice a polite, professional monotone. The pen in her pocket was aimed directly at him, the button on her uniform capturing every word. For the first hour, the conversation was maddeningly mundane. Stocks, mergers, gossip about rivals. Mia moved in and out of the alcove, refilling glasses, delivering appetizers, her anxiety growing. The gambit seemed like it was going to fail. Then one of the board members, a man named Peterson, brought up the competency hearing. "Are you sure about this, Sterling?" Peterson asked, swirling the wine in his glass. "Forcing Silas out like this, it's a bold move. It could get messy for the brand if the press gets wind of it." Sterling let out a low, confident chuckle. "Don't worry about the press, Richard. I have them covered. And as for my uncle, he's made it easy for me. The man spent 6 months pretending to be a homeless cripple. He's handing me the company on a silver platter. The doctors are already on our side. It's a slam dunk." "And what about this Waitress?" the other man, Davies, chimed in. "The one his lawyers are championing as his character witness." Mia, who was clearing plates from a nearby table, held her breath. Sterling waved a dismissive hand. "The Waitress, please. A broke, desperate girl from the slums. I've already had my people dig into her. Drowning in debt. A sick mother. We're painting her as a gold digger who tried to manipulate a sick old man. By the time my lawyers are done with her, the board will think she's a con artist. We even offered her $250,000 to disappear. The fact that she refused just makes her look like she's holding out for more." He leaned in his voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The truth is, the old man has lost it. He's a liability, but a liability we can control. Once he's legally declared incompetent, I'll be his conservator. I'll control his assets, his vote, everything. I'll stick him in a comfortable facility, and he can finger paint for the rest of his life. The company will be where it belongs. With me." Mia felt a cold fury wash over her. It was all there. The admission of his scheme, the slander against her, the chilling, callous plan for his uncle. She had it. She finished her shift in a daze, her professionalism a thin veneer over the triumph and disgust churning inside her. She handed the button and the pen to Isabella, who was waiting for her in a car down the block. Back at the hotel, they uploaded the audio and video. The quality was crystal clear. Sterling's voice, full of arrogance and deceit, filled the silent, expensive suite. Arthur Finch, the skeptical lawyer, listened with his eyes wide, a slow grin spreading across his face. Silas watched the playback, his own face, a mask of sorrow and grim vindication. He looked at Mia, and his eyes were filled with a respect that went far beyond gratitude. "You did it, Amelia," he said softly. "You gave me the truth." "He underestimated me." Mia replied, a sense of her own power, a power she never knew she possessed surging through her. "He underestimated the Waitress." The board meeting was scheduled for the following week. It was no longer just a competency hearing. It was a showdown. And Mia Russo was no longer a pawn. She was holding the checkmate. The Corbin Global boardroom was on the 80th floor, a cathedral of glass and steel that offered a god's-eye view of the city. A long obsidian table reflected the grim faces of the 10 board members, men and women who controlled a global empire. At one end sat Sterling Corbin, flanked by his legal team, looking polished, confident, and concerned. At the other end sat Silas, looking calm and resolute. Beside him were his lawyer, Arthur Finch, and Mia Russo. Mia had never been in a room so intimidating. She wore a simple, modest dress that Isabella had helped her pick out, feeling like a sparrow in an eagle's nest. The board members looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disdain. She was the waitress, the wild card in this high-stakes power play. Sterling began the proceedings, his voice smooth and filled with feigned sorrow. "Members of the board, it is with the heaviest of hearts that I bring this matter before you. My uncle Silas Corbin, the brilliant man who built this company, is unwell. His recent eccentricities have become a danger to himself and to the stability of Corbin Global." He presented his case backed by paid-for psychiatric evaluations and carefully selected anecdotes. He spoke of Silas's disappearance and his delusional life on the streets. He painted a picture of a man lost to grief, a tragic figure who needed to be protected from himself. Then he turned his attention to Mia. And he has fallen under the influence of this young woman, Ms. Amelia Russo, a person of questionable background and immense financial desperation. We believe her motives are opportunistic. Mia met his gaze across the long table. His eyes were cold, dismissive. He still saw her as nothing. When it was Silas's turn to speak, he didn't address the board. He looked at his nephew. "Sterling, I have always known about your ambition. I mistook it for drive. I was wrong. It is a cancer, a greed that has corrupted everything you touch. You see," Sterling said to the board, shaking his head sadly, "paranoia, delusions." "It's not paranoia when you have proof," Arthur Finch said, his voice cutting through the tension. He nodded to an assistant who dimmed the lights and turned on a large screen at the end of the room. "We would like to present Exhibit A, a recording from a dinner meeting at the Onyx Room just 3 nights ago." Sterling's face went white. The color drained from his cheeks as his own voice filled the silent boardroom crisp and clear. "The old man has lost it. I'll be his conservator. I'll control his assets, his vote, everything. I'll stick him in a comfortable facility, and he can finger paint for the rest of his life." The board members listened their expressions, shifting from skepticism to shock, and then to undisguised fury. They were not fools. They were sharks who could smell blood in the water, and they had just realized Sterling was the one who was bleeding. The recording continued, playing out Sterling's entire confession, including his slanderous, dismissive comments about Mia. When the lights came up, the silence was deafening. Sterling was frozen, his mouth slightly agape, a portrait of a man whose world had just been utterly and completely destroyed. One of the oldest board members, a formidable woman named Evelyn Reed, fixed Sterling with an icy stare. "Get out," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Get out of this boardroom and get out of this company. You'll be hearing from our corporate counsel regarding fraud and conspiracy." Sterling stumbled to his feet, his composure shattered, and practically fled the room, his lawyers trailing behind him like pilot fish. The competency hearing was over before it began. Silas Corbin was in full control. Evelyn Reed then turned her gaze to Mia. The look was no longer disdainful, but one of deep, penetrating respect. "Ms. Russo," she said, her voice clear, It seems this company owes you a significant debt of gratitude." Later that day, back in the penthouse suite that no longer felt like a cage, Silas stood with Mia by the window, looking out over the city. "You saved more than just my company today," he said quietly. "You saved me from my own despair. You proved my experiment was a success. There is still good in the world, Amelia. I just did what anyone would have done," Mia said, though she knew that wasn't true. "No," Silas corrected her. "You did what you did, and that has made all the difference." He handed her a thick envelope. "This isn't a reward, it's a restitution and a beginning." Inside, Mia found documents. The first was a cashier's check that paid off her mother's medical debt in full. The second paid off her student loans. The third was the deed to a small, charming restaurant space in a good neighborhood fully paid for. And the last was an acceptance letter and a full all-expenses-paid scholarship to the most prestigious culinary institute in the country. Tears streamed down Mia's face as she looked at him. "Silas, I can't accept all this." "You are not accepting a gift," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You are accepting a partnership. I am investing in you, Amelia Russo. Just as you invested in me when you gave me that first sandwich. I want to eat at your restaurant one day. I want to see the art you create." He smiled, the sad, weary lines around his eyes finally softening. "Besides," he added, "I've started a new foundation, the Catherine and Lily Corbin Foundation for Compassion. Its mission is to find and support everyday heroes, people who perform small acts of kindness without any expectation of reward. I need someone to run it, someone who understands its mission better than anyone." Mia looked from the documents in her hand to the face of the man she had known as a broken beggar. Her life, which had been a repeating loop of exhaustion and debt, had been shattered open, revealing a future she had never dared to dream of. It wasn't because of a billionaire's charity. It was because, on a cold night, faced with her own desperation, she had chosen to be kind. She had chosen to see the person, not the circumstance, and in saving him, she had finally truly saved herself. Mia's story is a powerful reminder that the smallest act of kindness can have the most profound and unpredictable consequences. She didn't offer a sandwich in hopes of a reward. She did it because her own struggles taught her the value of compassion. In a world that often feels divided and cynical, her story proves that a single person choosing empathy can change everything, exposing deceit and restoring faith in humanity. What would you have done? Would you have walked by, or would you have stopped? If this story touched your heart and made you think, please help us share it with the world. Click the like button. Share this video with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and challenge us. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. What are your thoughts on Mia's journey? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.